One of the best pass rushing linebackers in this year's draft that seems to be going maybe a little bit under the radar because of the confusion of the labels that have been placed on which position is he going to play at the next level. And that is Jalon Walker out of Georgia. So let's get right into it. Jalon Walker is going to be one of the younger draft prospects this year, a 3-year junior. He's only 20 years old right now. That's just over 6'2", 245 pounds. That this past season with Georgia played more snaps in the box than he did on the line of scrimmage. But that's a huge aspect of his game is the flexibility that he brings. This is one of those players that I truly believe you could grade him in 2 different categories. You should grade him on where you think he's going to fit best, but for the sake of today's video, I'm going to consider him a linebacker. There is a ton of flexibility that you could truly just view him as an edge rusher. Obviously, his build isn't your typical 6'4", 265 pounds at just over 6'2", 245. However, his skill sets and a lot of his critical factors will likely translate much better to being viewed as simply an edge defender. However, there is still a lot of flexibility within his game to line up as a linebacker, and in today's NFL with so much flexibility for linebackers, it's important to have a guy that can line in multiple spots, and he definitely brings that. He brings that Sam Backer type of outside 3-4 linebacker feel, just in a little bit of a smaller frame. That's how we're going to view him today, but I'm going to give a lot of attention to his ability to get after the quarterback. It's a big strength. It's such a selling point of his game, and it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever that the most important thing truly is finding the right spot for this piece. And if he does get to the right spot where he can play really fast and be a downhill linebacker, I wouldn't be surprised if Jalon Walker ends up slipping into the first round. Someone falls in love with this prospect because he truly has that kind of talent. He's only 20 years old, which a lot of people buy into the upside as a 3-year player with Georgia, a 4-star recruit out of high school that has the kind of talent that's going to translate really well as a pass rusher to the NFL. So let's start right there first with his pass coverage ability. And to me, I gave him a slightly above average. In terms of zone coverage, I think he's a good zone coverage backer. I think he's pretty assignment sound, as we'll touch on. And in man coverage, I end up giving him just a sufficient average grade. That being said, I think there's just some limitation and coverage piece. Not to say that he can't do it, but the role expansion I think could be a little bit limited. For me as a man coverage backer, I think on tight ends, he's built to press guys physical, and he clearly has the athleticism to deal with running backs into the flat. Take away those underneath routes specifically. I think there's real limitations in terms of matchups that you want to put him on, and the complexity of routes could lead to some eventual issues. What he does well is he really sets his eyes really well early in terms of his zone coverage drop. The assignment sound in the sense that if you ask him to get underneath the number 1 wide receiver out wide in the flat, say he's going to cover 3, very effectively is going to get to his spots. But there also is some awareness that he carries within his game to read throughout combinations, pass the guy off vertically to drop back off underneath. He does that pretty soundly. He plays with nice patience on drops, specifically as an on-the-ball player, as an outside backer, as a Sam backer specifically, or even a Will if he's stepping down to the line of scrimmage, to read through body language, not overplay those drops specifically and get pressed back up vertically and leave a whole bunch of underneath separation. He's going to trust his body control, which is one of the biggest surprises to me when watching Jalon Walker is the agility that it carries, explosive change of direction ability, and he shows that within the patience. My issues, I think that his eye balance in zone coverage specifically tends to float a little bit. Sometimes the awareness to find routes in zone coverage, especially as a off-ball backer that has to get into deeper drops. He has the athleticism, the recovery ability, say he bites too hard on a play action fake to get back into the play. A good ability to create depth within his back pedal. He really covers ground, which linebackers coaches love, especially from an off-ball linebacker that you may have to do that in some of those deeper zone drops. On a distance, if it's a 3rd down and long, not let them get to the sticks. And he truly brings those abilities. It's inconsistent right now at finding routes in zone coverage beyond his initial assignment. This will pop up more when we get to the instinct side of things. Tunnel vision in terms of this is my responsibility and maybe not overlapping into another responsibility. And the other flip side of that as well is he can also be pried out of plays based on route development. He has a responsibility to play an underneath route, and that gets pressed away from the play. He may not have the instincts as of now to pass that off and say, okay, I see they're trying to set me up here, and he may kind of go along for the ride and get peeled out of the place. Also, to me, isn't the most fluid coverage piece either. Now, in terms of playing with balance and his hip transitions, which surprised me, he's with adequate hip transition and run that shows up on the ball in terms of, getting out a couple yards on the play, being able to open up back to receivers, breaking back across the field, or even if he was at an off-ball spot and he had to open and turn to run, the swivel within his coverage, which also kind of limits into man coverage, stiff, it doesn't look as natural. So when we get to some of these man coverage where I end up giving him just an average grade, I think the positives are that movement-wise, move laterally down the line of scrimmage. He could deal with beneath routes specifically. He could deal with running back side of the backfield. He can transition pretty well. Lateral movement allows him to stay pretty balanced while also dealing with some of the more basic routes underneath. There's also the aspect that he has a lot of control at the top of his route as well.
See him one-on-one here from the slot. You notice a little bit of stiffness in the swivel. But watch how he transitions out of this break, and you see the burst to kind of recover quickly, and then some of the long speed to track.
Well, that is good right now as a coverage piece to stay balanced, to transition, and not have a lot of false movement at the top of routes. Just a lack of fluidity is a big reason I only give him an average grade. I think there's certain matchups that you're really going to want to stay from as of now. Now, in terms of the play speed, I'm pressing into a great grade. I think he's very good right now in terms of his play speed. You've seen in his athletic traits, the ability to squeeze down the line of scrimmage off the backside of a run, how tight he squeezes to the line of scrimmage, really limits airspace. Now, that takes me back to the pass coverage aspect where finding routes, I think there is that shows up where instinctually speaking, a guy that's going to make a ton of plays on the football, I don't think that's there right now because of aspects like that where in zone coverage, can he find a route but then also minimize the airspace? He's going to leave windows, especially the deeper you have to drop him into zone coverage as of now. Athletically, he can get in the way of windows, he can drop, he can carry things vertically, is that he will leave lanes open. And I think, again, he doesn't have some of that plastering right now in zone coverage that I would love for being a playmaker specifically. But what he does do is against the run, he plays very tight to the line of scrimmage. He can really turn a corner with a lot of speed, that's for sure, or on stunts as well, which also can tap into the play speed of his closing ability and that ability to really close tight angles and take fantastic angles to the football. Plus change of direction speed when you talk about tracking down a quarterback or the ball carrier, there's an explosiveness within his change of direction that he carries. I think his long speed sideline to sideline is good. I don't think it's elite. Maybe he could help himself out getting into some spots a little bit earlier. Open field tackling, the real focus to break down in the open space, which I think translates again really well to play speed. Switched up when you talk about attacking pass lanes. There's an urgency about his game when he's working downhill. There's an aggressive nature when working downhill, as we'll talk about as a pass rusher. For me, while I gave him a very good grade there, the instinct to me, and this comes back to experience as well, more of an average grade at this time. With more time, this could improve. I also think it's important to put him in the right position to really lean into what he does best. I think on the ball, he translates really well. He's very fast to press gaps. He can really limit offensive linemen reaching him at the second level because he'll just slip back past underneath them.
You will see some tightness through this rep, but what really stands out is that ability to press an offensive lineman into these pass rush moves to set up side steps or move over top of a blocker against a run. That shows up because of this ability to squeeze the airspace and then that agility and quickness laterally to take advantage of it.
One, I think reading through where the defensive lineman fills gaps against the run specifically, working off of that to fill an opposite gap, that can be inconsistent, that can be hit and miss. He could just leave gaps open. Comes the A gap, B gaps open. He may not slide to fill that gap necessarily. We'll see that more as a run defender here. I think his discipline's also a little more hit and miss. You'll see it at the mesh point, dealing quarterback and running back, just being overly aggressive. That's tend to be where he leans. His eyes as well, really tracking the football and kind of losing sense of the entire design of the play and the entire setup of the play. So, reverse plays, trick plays in the backfield, things like that can really peel him out of assignments. Has a tendency to jump off side. Being consistent to scrape back over top, get himself in a good spot early, that is a little bit inconsistent as of now. Now, he definitely has a skill set to be effective filling run gaps, beating through and making a good decision in terms of scraping off the backside, which points to liking him more on the line of scrimmage, that when you have less of that responsibility, you allow him to play a little bit more downhill as a player. His abilities against the run, which would be the stoutness and the ability to set at the point of attack. And I think he's good in both of these categories. I think he's very good in terms of the stout. And even with that, my biggest issue for the most part is the way that he sets his base. I don't think he always does a great job of leveraging himself or creating the most length opportunities for himself. And his base can be a little bit tall at times, really disallow reset opportunities as a run defender. The positive is, number one, he's very strong in the ankles. He does a great job of just absorbing contact and continue to work, continue to hold his ground against runs, off ball, and on the ball, working against offensive tackles. I think right now he's actually more consistent as an off ball backer that shows his stout guards or tackles at the second level, rather than stepping on the ball and having to deal with tackles that are trying to work him on the end. He's truly built at the point of attack to show stoutness. Of a rarity, right, in today's NFL to have a guy that's built for truly a stack and shed ability. To your point, he creates a lot of force. There's true knockback within his game. There's a separating factor when he creates contact with an offensive lineman. He's at an edge rusher position. His ability to create force through the ground. That way he can create knockback opportunities and create potential lockback opportunities. My biggest knock here for stoutness is that he feels like, number one, he takes on blocks head on. Like, there's not a whole bunch of half man, and because that he makes it difficult for himself to shed blocks because he took a guy full on as an offensive lineman that just outsizes him. The other aspect of that too is I don't really claims gaps. He could be a little bit caught in an in-between mode too often, where I don't think he always settles and kind of stake of like, okay, this is my gap, this is where I'm going to hold my ground, and that allows opportunities for guys, for running backs to kind of work both ways off of it. Entry against tight ends, I mean, he felt like a bully at time against tight ends at the point of attack. There's a really nice finishing technique as a tackler. Technique is very fluid as a tackler specifically. He's incredibly strong strong in the upper body. There's a lot of pop that he delivers. His entry, though, for me at the lower body is just the inconsistency. It's not always that firm at the point of attack. Again, I don't think it's always leveraged properly, too square, rather than really creating separation, and he loses some of that distance, especially on the ball. Can lead to, again, the ability to reset into blocks and get a stack and then reset and then get a shed. Ultimately, that can be some problem. Positive is he doesn't give up much ground. He's so stout at the point of attack that he typically doesn't get moved off the ball, even if he doesn't have a shed. But he actually, on the flip side, because of his aggressive nature, typically plays behind the line of scrimmage more than anything. Translates to his take-on technique. It also translates to, again, dealing with down blocks and offensive linemen that are kind of scraping over top to get up to the second level. At that point, he plays with a really nice take-on technique, with a readiness, hand usage to deal with those blocks, to slip blocks, to dip back underneath, a readiness in his lower body that translates well. He's very well coordinated in that sense. Let me get the pop and let me drop back underneath. I think there is good length at the point of attack. His inconsistency, I think, again, back in the way that he places himself against the run when there's traffic around him specifically, that can really show up between the tackles as well, in terms of there's traffic around him. How well does he actually get into that entry point at that point? There's a stoutness. I think he's got very good stoutness, and I think, honestly, there's probably more upside here just because of the mentality, much of the strength and flexion in the lower body, which really shows off to deal with contact. The ability to shed blocks, I think he's also good in this category too. I think he can fail to shed beyond the entry point, so again, resetting. His base tends to rise up, I think, a little bit through contact, and that tends to be an issue. Dialed in his base more consistently, you'd see much better results here just from a consistency perspective. I don't love how he takes guys straight on. Again, that limits shed upside as well with his hand usage, the activeness with his hands to continue working. There's a great skill set to continue to find very accurate with these breakpoints, where through initial contact, let me work back through, find another breakpoint, let me get the wrist, let me hit the elbow, things like that to continue working on the play. It's hard to just get a clear latch on this guy because his hands continue to work and there is a lot of strength within his game. I just don't always think he gets the shed on time because of the way that he positions himself into block. Body control specifically, slip blocks at the second level, and you'll see this in pursuit where a lineman tries to cut him off, and that's where the athleticism, the agility really gets to shine of his game and what he's capable of. So in terms of run defense, there's a lot of things that I love. The thing I'll have to hit on here, of course, is his ability to get after the passer, because this is, to me, obviously his biggest strength as a player. I think that he has an opportunity to press into, look at him as a true linebacker, and you said, okay, could he be the best pass rushing linebacker? I haven't seen them all, but I think, yes, there's a case that this may be the best pass rushing linebacker. He can press into an elite category here, there. So again, this is where you could definitely make the case, like, oh, we want him on the ball a ton. And I think that's what he's built for. I think he's built for a sandbacker role. I think he's built for an outside linebacker role. In a 3-4 outside linebacker role, I think that's kind of his style. I think that's what he's going to be best at. He's with a great first step. There's a lot of twitch to his game, very accurate. You'll get occasional offside penalties, but it's a very accurate timing off the ball as well. I love his footwork. It really attack creases, which is huge because when you talk about an off-ball backer, where are they blitzing from a lot of times? Between the tackle box. So can you find creases? Can you split guards? He absolutely can do that. There's a success rate there when he does it. There's a ton of flexibility from where he blitzes from. Then his cornering ability with speed allows him to go inside-outside. Can he step from the inside, work around and wrap around a tackle and slip the edge? Yes, he could do those things while also maintaining speed. So there's a lot of flexibility, which within his lower body is incredibly impactful. Plus, he rushes with a lot of long strides. There's a lot of depth created in his strides. Now, I'll talk about some of the issues in terms of creativity, those kind of things. Also has a nice little long arm setup that he can get to. He's got an array of pass rush moves that he can kind of tap into as a pass rusher. There's an explosive agility to his game laterally, which is very impressive. This will show up from the interior. Two-handed swipe that attaches along with it. Those things coordinate really well. And the core strength to actually shed in those spots with the ankle flexion to deal with contact. One of the biggest strengths for him is going to be the contact balance. Off the ball and you have to blitz. Here comes the running back, then the guard. Can you take contact and still rush your rep, or does it just stall? It doesn't just stall for him. He has that kind of contact balance where, oh, I got knocked off, but I'm still rolling. He's so strong in the lower body and the ankles, he just continues to work, and he has the hand usage to attach those things together. An explosive lower body and a real twitch to his game. To me, that contact balance is the best that I've seen so far. I do think he can play with a little bit less leverage as a bull rusher specifically, where he's not constantly under the pads. One of the biggest issues there, much predictability within his pass rush. While there is a variety, I think there's too much predictability as the pass rush reps tends to unfold. Number one, he can kind of look like a one-speed rusher too often at times. It doesn't feel as fluid in terms of setting up an off the tackle. It's a little bit more straightforward. It's all over the place. Feels kind of chaotic, and it kind of ruins his entry to create consistent leverage and get under pads. To that point, it creates less suddenness into the point of attack. As twitchy as he is, there should be more suddenness. There should be more, I got the tackle off balance. Boom, I'm going to enter. Now I got you in trouble.
As you can see, he has the footwork alone to get an offensive tackle off balance. Now, it's a little chaotic. It's a little bit upright. You see that into the initial entry, but he's able to keep working. There's the contact balance. There's the finish. Then, of course, he gets to sack.
There's not enough of that. It's not as sudden into the point of attack. I feel like they lack creativity as a pass rusher too often, especially on the outside. Way more predictable, and you'll see tackles just kind of get set early, and they'll settle down on reps where there could be a lot more capability, because the thing that he does well is there's counters. There's a second effort win to his game. There's a lockout. So what happens is even if he stalls, he can continue to get back into play and work again. That could be even better if you threw in the aspect that he wasn't as predictable at the point of attack. Depth, as I talked about, which allows him to create half-man opportunities, which will transition well with a guy at his strength, with a guy with his lower body strength specifically. One of my best awareness traits of his game is the way that he kind of anticipates anticipates help and support. That's why he shows contact balance, but he shows a little dip. Here comes running, let me dip around it. Let me slide around the tight end that's lined in line. He's not a blind pass rusher. There's an instinctual feel as a pass rusher. Probably his best instincts are as a pass rusher in that sense. Also kind of just maneuver his way around potential threats that can throw him off his pass rush plan. I do think he has a little bit less bend, in terms of the bend that he can create, which leads to less slipping kind of blocks opportunities. That would be the one major knock. I think there's just less bend in his game. Is some lean within the upper body, which again allows, there's pop plus lean in the upper body, which allows some opportunities to slip blocks more consistently. So for me, I think if there was more creativity, even better. And I think with how young he is, you look at the upside of like, man, he can continue to work. There's a second effort approach. Under moves they could throw into this. There's a ton of strength into the point of attack. There's a really good get off upside as well. I think he's good in that spot right now. Shown his agility off. You'll see spin move, ability to work through contact. You'll see the reps just don't die. There's a very high-end motor to his game. There's great toughness to his game. It transitions to great special teams value, which we saw immediately. For me, overall, I think that's his biggest strength, clearly, and I think that's something that a team could look at and just fall in love with and be like, yo, if there's a trait, we're looking for a guy that has like a trait that can be special. Overall, to me, I think he's more of a sandbacker. I think you want him more in a line. I like him as an outside linebacker in a 3-4. Definitely can do both. And because sandbackers aren't always on the ball, they're sometimes off ball on the strong side of the formation. I want him to deal with tight ends at the point of attack because he did really well against those guys. That's the kind of realm that I want him in, and he can be a space player, but I don't think there's that much fluidity and coverage there. So I don't want to have him utilized a ton there. I don't want as many coverage assignments as I want him just being downhill and aggressive. I think that's why we saw so much spiral. This is a player that has a lot of upside. I think for me as a linebacker, the critical factors are a little bit disappointing. Pass coverage a little bit closer to average. He can play, his play speed is very good, but you have to get him in the right spot. As an edge rusher, I think he'd grade out higher just across the board right away, but I think the flexibility is important. So overall, this is one where I think you really do have to take a swing if you're going to give him a good grade, and I tend to buy into those guys. So as of now, I'm giving a 6.6 grade. He could surprise, slip into the first round. This isn't a surefire first round pick based on that grade, but it could absolutely get into some of our other videos. You'll know where that ranks. So Jalon Walker, got him a 6.6 right now. That could change. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.